So Sweden recently joined NATO, and every NATO nation has to sign a DCA agreement. Now, they vary between nations, and some nations have a little bit more of a spine than Sweden. Sweden's capitulating to everything, but basically these agreements are with the United States. They're military agreements with the United States. But NATO, that's not supposed to be just the US. Oh, but it be.
Yeah.
And I recently spoke with Ben Norton about this, and he pointed out that part of these DCA agreements is also something called military interoperability, which means that your weapon systems in your country have to be interoperable with US weapon systems. Now, what does that mean? It means your country is going to have to spend billions to update your shit so that it can be interoperable with US weapon systems, which means that, of course, the military-industrial complex in the US makes bank because of this agreement.
I would imagine for the Swedish systems to work with the US, you're going to need a hex wrench, I would assume.
You're also going to need that little IKEA booklet where you have the
frowny face
with the guy with the pencil behind his ear making a frowny face, and then the guy on the phone who looks really happy.
You'd absolutely need that. And then a guy firing a missile at children, and he's got the smiley face.
He's got the smiley face. So this DCA agreement, with regards to what's happening specifically in Sweden, but it's not actually specific to Sweden. Again, it is any NATO country has to agree to some variation of this. So first of all, it's the people are not allowed to vote on it. It's actually not something that is given out to the public, right? Nobody gets to see it. This journalist
doesn't sound very democratic.
This journalist had it sent to him by a source, and he points
That's how
out
I get my drugs.
He points out that it looks like a capitulation document that you'd have to sign after
losing a war. The NATO agreement is like, we will do your bidding from here on out.
The US has unlimited access to all Swedish waters, land, and air, and as well as...
Does it say the US or NATO?
The US. That's my point. Well, it's the US military.
That very much sounds like the US runs NATO, which I thought they denied.
Doesn't it just, though? As well as 17 very important military bases that Sweden runs. The US is also allowed to build up these bases and these areas with their own private areas where Swedes or Swedish officials are not allowed, okay? The US also has access to private land, roads, waterways, and airports, and they have the right to build whatever and wherever they want, their own little private, kind of like the green zone type places with McDonald's and their own housing and all of that stuff.
But the McDonald's has to have herring.
And
that's the one stipulation.
And they won't be subject to Swedish law. So let's say that an American on one of these bases rapes or kills or robs or whatever a Swede. They aren't subject to Swedish law, and the Swedish law enforcement, not even Swedish Secret Service, are allowed to check any military vehicles or anything like that. So they're not allowed to know anything about what's going on Swedish soil. As part of this, of course, basically black sites. Sweden has not put in any kind of stipulation about nuclear weapons, about not wanting to host nuclear weapons,
which used to be something that they were very strongly opposed to. It used to be that Sweden said, we will not house nuclear weapons.
Yeah, they didn't. And since you're not allowed to check any of the trucks or any armaments or anything that comes into these bases, I mean, who knows what could be in there, right? I bring this up, one, because I absolutely have to shit on the remarkable level of stupidity and hubris of the Swedish government, the ass-lickingness of the Swedish government that has its tongue so far up the ass of Uncle Sam that it's coming out the front. I have to comment on how dumb this is, but also point out how this is not unique to Sweden. This is a NATO project. So when we talk about how the US has its clutches on Europe and why Europe won't say boo to the US, even after the US blows up a pipeline or crashes, Germany's economy, nobody's saying boo because the US literally has Europe's balls in a salad shooter. They can't, they are stuck. They are stuck as vassal states, as colonies.
Annabelle would like to point out that Australia is the same.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is why. This is one of the primary reasons why, right? Why, you know, when people are like, why doesn't Europe stand up to the U.S.? Well, ding, 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 ding. It's shit like this.
And this is what we mean when we say Europe is on crack, tongue up the ass.
The other thing that I want to point out that's a part of this is how much this affects not just Europe, but then, of course, the US, because what Europe is being forced to do is latch on to a dying empire, which is crushing European economies, which, of course, then has an effect on the American economy. And it's like this cycle of a spiraling empire. And meanwhile, you know, Russia, one of the main reasons to start this proxy war in Ukraine, to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, as our wise politicians have pointed out, was to crush the ruble, was to crush the economy of Russia and get Putin out, to basically cause regime change. That hasn't happened. The ruble has actually grown because Russia was like, okay, Germany doesn't want our gas anymore, or you blew up their pipeline. All right, we're going to sell to China. We're going to sell to Asia, the largest market in the world. It's like the level of, again, stupidity and hubris that the US and Europe, vis-a-vis being vassal states of the US, has is remarkable. And it's not going to end well for us.
The proxy war in Ukraine has largely backfired for the aims of the US empire. And it's destroying Europe, as you mentioned. That's not causing the US to back down. The US just wants that proxy war to go on and on and on.